Monica's fingers closed around Yo Bonhwa's silk tie, forcing his head down, forcing him to look at her instead of the sniper's scope. "Don't look up," she whispered. "There's a sniper at 200. Your driver just signaled him. Kiss me or you die." His hand came up to the back of her neck, steady and controlled despite the chaos. Then the bulletproof glass exploded where his head had been 3 seconds before. 10:47 p.m. on a Friday in October, and the Oralia Lounge's entrance smelled like rain-slicked concrete mixing with something Monica Winslow couldn't name, but recognized as power. Bergamot, maybe, or tobacco aged in barrels older than her college debt, or the particular scent of wealth so absolute it had stopped needing witnesses. The kind of smell that clung to men who owned silence instead of breaking it, who moved through rooms like oxygen, rearranged itself to accommodate their presence. Monica stood by the brass-framed door she'd just opened, the autumn chill cutting through her server's vest, the damp air carrying the smell of rain and diesel, and the particular tension of a city that traded secrets after dark. Yo Bonhwa paused on the threshold. Not walking out yet, just standing there adjusting his cufflinks, his profile sharp enough to slice through the amber light spilling from the Oralia's chandeliers. At 38, he carried himself with the kind of absolute economy that made excess feel like weakness, that made emotion seem like a tactical error waiting to be exploited. His jawline was carved with the precision of something deliberate, all brutal elegance and architectural lines that suggested genetics and discipline, and probably a childhood where mercy was a foreign language. Dark eyes that absorbed light without reflecting it, as if even illumination knew better than to challenge him. Hair styled with the kind of ruthless simplicity that took either a private barber or genetic luck, probably both. The rain had left a single drop at his temple, making the black look even darker against his skin. His suit was custom. She could tell by the way the fabric anticipated his movements, by the way it whispered rather than rustled. Men like him, men whose names made prosecutors retire early and witnesses relocate continents, men who carried violence like a second heartbeat, rarely acknowledged service staff. She'd learned that in her first week hiding behind this identity, had learned to read the micro-adjustments that telegraphed intent and lethality, had learned which patrons were simply rich and which ones were dangerous, had learned the difference between power that was purchased and power that was baptized in blood and maintained with calculated brutality. That's when Monica saw it. Through the glass door, in the reflection created by the interior lights against the rain-dark street, she could see the curb behind him. The driver, Yi-sung, she'd learned his name in week 3, had heard Bonhwa address him with the particular formality reserved for soldiers rather than staff. 8 years with the Yo Syndicate, according to the kitchen gossip that circulated through the Oralia staff like contraband. Right-handed. She'd noticed that immediately because her NSA training had taught her to catalog which hand held the weapon, which hand signed the checks, which hand would move first when the situation collapsed. But tonight, Yi-sung checked his watch with his left hand. The wrong hand. And his eyes weren't on Bonhwa's back. They were scanning the roofline across the street at exactly 2:00 from where Bonhwa stood. A dead man's confirmation signal. Monica's mind calculated trajectories and angles the way other people calculated tips. Bulletproof glass on the town car, yes. Bulletproof vest under the bespoke suit, probably. But the gap between the door frame and the vehicle, 6 feet of exposure, 6 feet of kill zone. And Yi-sung had just checked his watch with the wrong goddamn hand. She'd promised herself she would stay invisible. She'd promised herself that the cipher had died the night she burned the NSA black site files and disappeared into minimum wage anonymity. But some reflexes don't die, they just wait. Monica moved. Welcome back, my fierce hearts and midnight dreamers. Before we dive into this world of danger and desire, make sure you're subscribed. Hit that like button and tell me in the comments, what time is it where you're watching from? Let's find out who's awake for the thrill. Let's begin. The brownstone on West 127th had been abandoned for 2 years, according to the tax records Monica had memorized 3 months ago when she first started mapping exit routes. Bon HWA said nothing as she led him through the side entrance, past the rusted gate that screamed when it moved, into the kind of darkness that smelled like mold and forgotten lives. She could feel his eyes on her back, cataloging every step she took with the same precision she'd used to save his life 20 minutes earlier. "Sit," she said, gesturing to a metal folding chair someone had left behind. "Don't touch anything." He didn't sit. Of course he didn't. Men like Bon HWA didn't take orders from waitresses who grabbed their ties and whispered about snipers. But he also didn't walk out, which meant he was smart enough to know that the woman who'd pulled him out of a kill zone wasn't just lucky. "Who are you?" His voice was quiet, the kind of quiet that preceded violence or respect. She couldn't tell which yet. Monica pulled a set of precision tools from inside her vest, the kind that had cost her 3 months of tip money and a contact she'd promised herself she'd never use again. "Give me your phone." "Answer my question first." "Your phone has 3 trackers on it, one in the SIM card, which you probably know about, one in the battery casing, which you definitely don't, and one buried in the firmware that's been pinging your location every 4 minutes for the last 72 hours. She held out her hand. "Give me your phone or die in the next 12 minutes when whoever set this up realizes you're still breathing." He handed her the phone. Monica worked in silence, her fingers moving with the muscle memory of a woman who'd spent 5 years breaking encryption for the NSA's Black Site division. The SIM card came out first, then the back panel, then the microscopic tracker embedded beneath the Yo Syndicate's custom logo. She crushed each one beneath her boot heel before moving to the firmware, her laptop balanced on her knees as she ran the diagnostic that would tell them exactly how deep the betrayal went. "You walked into a kill box tonight," she said, watching the code scroll across her screen. "Someone inside your organization sold you to a professional crew. They knew your route, your timeline, your security protocols. They knew Yi-sung would be driving because he's the only one you trust with night runs." She looked up, met his eyes. They knew because someone told them, someone close. The laptop beeped. Monica's blood went cold. The access code that authorized this tracker. She turned the screen so he could see the digital signature. "It belongs to your brother. Yo Taemin just tried to have you assassinated." Taemin sold out his own brother for power. If you believe loyalty is everything and you can't stand backstabbers, hit that subscribe button right now. Comment, "Loyalty first," if you'd never betray your family for a check. Yi-sung was waiting in the basement of the meat packing plant on Gansevort, zip-tied to a support beam with blood running from his nose, where Bon Hwa's men had convinced him to stop running. The air smelled like iron and old fear, the kind that soaked into concrete and never left. Monica descended the stairs behind Bon HWA, watching the way his lieutenant stepped back automatically, the way even his own soldiers understood that proximity to their boss right now was a death sentence. "Hyung Nim," Yi-sung whispered, using the honorific that meant older brother that meant respect earned through years of loyalty. Please listen." Bon HWA said nothing. He simply stood there, hands in his pockets, waiting with the patience of a man who'd learned that silence extracted more truth than questions ever could. Monica moved to the side, staying in Yi-sung's peripheral vision but not his direct line of sight. She'd interrogated enough assets to know that shame worked better when the subject couldn't make eye contact with their judge. "Tell us about the signal," she said quietly. "The watch check with your left hand. Who taught you that?" "They have my sister," Yi-sung's voice cracked. "They have Jaiwon. They showed me a video. She was crying. She was begging. They said they'd send her back to me in pieces if I didn't." He stopped, chest heaving. "I didn't have a choice." "There's always a choice," Bon HWA said, and his voice was colder than the October rain still clinging to Monica's uniform. "Not when they show you your sister's fingers in a box," Yi-sung screamed, and the sound echoed off the basement walls like a confession bouncing back. "Not when they tell you exactly where your nephew goes to school, what time he gets picked up, which route his mother takes on Thursdays. Not when they give you 48 hours to decide between your boss and your blood." Monica watched Bon Hwa's jaw tighten, watched the micro-expression that said he understood the calculation even if he couldn't forgive it. "Who approached you?" she asked. 3 men, Americans, maybe European, I couldn't tell. They spoke perfect Korean, but their eyes were wrong. They knew everything about the Yo operations, everything about Hyung Nim's security detail, everything about. He looked up at Bon HWA, and Monica saw the exact moment the rest of the truth broke free. They knew because someone gave them the files, someone who had access to everything. T-Min, Bon HWA said flatly. Yi-sung nodded, and then his whole body started shaking. There's more. They didn't just want you dead. They wanted to make sure I died too, so there'd be no witness, no trail back to them. He looked down at his chest, at the vest beneath his shirt. They strapped a bomb to me. It's on a timer. When you walked out of the Oralia tonight, I had 90 minutes before it detonates automatically. That was 73 minutes ago. Monica's blood turned to ice. Can you disarm it? No, Yi-sung met Bon Hwa's eyes, but I can make sure it only kills me. Yi-sung was waiting in the basement of the meat packing plant on Gansevort, zip-tied to a support beam with blood running from his nose, where Bon Hwa's men had convinced him to stop running. The air smelled like iron and old fear, the kind that soaked into concrete and never left. Monica descended the stairs behind Bon HWA, watching the way his lieutenant stepped back automatically, the way even his own soldiers understood that proximity to their boss right now was a death sentence. Hyung Nim, Yi-sung whispered, using the honorific that meant older brother, that meant respect earned through years of loyalty. Please, please listen. Bon HWA said nothing. He simply stood there, hands in his pockets, waiting with the patience of a man who'd learned that silence extracted more truth than questions ever could. Monica moved to the side, staying in Yi-sung's peripheral vision but not his direct line of sight. She'd interrogated enough assets to know that shame worked better when the subject couldn't make eye contact with their judge. Tell us about the signal, she said quietly. The watch check with your left hand. Who taught you that? They have my sister, Yi-sung's voice cracked. They have Jaiwon. They showed me a video. She was crying. She was begging. They said they'd send her back to me in pieces if I didn't. He stopped, chest heaving. I didn't have a choice. There's always a choice, Bon HWA said, and his voice was colder than the October rain still clinging to Monica's uniform. Not when they show you your sister's fingers in a box, Yi-sung screamed, and the sound echoed off the basement walls like a confession bouncing back. Not when they tell you exactly where your nephew goes to school, what time he gets picked up, which route his mother takes on Thursdays. Not when they give you 48 hours to decide between your boss and your blood. Monica watched Bon Hwa's jaw tighten, watched the micro-expression that said he understood the calculation even if he couldn't forgive it. Who approached you? She asked. 3 men, Americans, maybe European, I couldn't tell. They spoke perfect Korean, but their eyes were wrong. They knew everything about the Yo operations, everything about Hyung Nim's security detail, everything about. He looked up at Bon HWA, and Monica saw the exact moment the rest of the truth broke free. They knew because someone gave them the files, someone who had access to everything. T-Min, Bon HWA said flatly. Yi-sung nodded, and then his whole body started shaking. There's more. They didn't just want you dead. They wanted to make sure I died too, so there'd be no witness, no trail back to them. He looked down at his chest, at the vest beneath his shirt. They strapped a bomb to me. It's on a timer. When you walked out of the Oralia tonight, I had 90 minutes before it detonates automatically. That was 73 minutes ago. Monica's blood turned to ice. Can you disarm it? No, Yi-sung met Bon Hwa's eyes, but I can make sure it only kills me. Monica's fingers were already moving across the vest's wiring, tracing the circuitry with the same precision she'd used on the phone trackers. Mercury switch on the shoulder straps, pressure sensor on the chest plate, and a timer that glowed red in the basement's dim light. 14 minutes. She'd diffused devices before, back when the NSA had sent her into places that didn't exist on any map, but those had been textbook assemblies built by engineers who followed protocols. This was artisan work, custom-made by someone who understood that the real trap wasn't the explosion. It was the hope that you could stop it. It's designed to kill the diffuser, she said quietly. 3 redundant triggers. Cut one wire, the others activate. Remove the vest, the mercury switch tips. Stop moving for more than 30 seconds, the motion sensor detonates. She looked at Yi-sung. "Whoever built this wanted to make sure you understood there was no way out." Bon Hua's lieutenant had already moved to the far end of the basement, hand on his weapon, eyes calculating blast radius and structural integrity. Bon Hwa himself hadn't moved at all. He just stood there, watching Yi-sung with an expression Monica couldn't read. Not anger anymore, something heavier. "Hyung Nim," Yi-sung said, and his voice had gone calm, the way voices do when people accept what's coming. "I need you to know something. When they showed me the video of Jaiwon, when they gave me the signal to use tonight, they also gave me a photograph." He swallowed hard. "It was your daughter, playing at the park on Tuesday. They know about her. They know where she goes to school." Bon Hua's mask cracked. Just for a second, but Monica saw it. The flash of pure rage followed immediately by fear. The kind of fear that came from loving something more than you loved your own survival. "That's why I'm doing this," Yi-sung continued. "Not to make up for what I did. I can't make up for that. But I can make sure they don't get to use me again. I can make sure the only person who dies from this bomb is the person who deserves it." "Yi-sung," Bon Hwa started. But Yi-sung was already moving. He lurched toward the basement's high window, the one that looked out onto the alley 20 feet above ground level. Monica realized his plan a half-second too late to stop it. He threw himself at the window with everything he had, his shoulders shattering the rusted frame, his body arcing up and out into the October night. The explosion came while he was still airborne. A flash of white light and pressure that knocked Monica into the wall, that made Bon Hua's lieutenant dive behind the support beam. The sound was massive and final, the kind that marked the end of something that couldn't be taken back. When Monica's ears stopped ringing, she looked up to find Bon Hwa standing at the broken window, staring out at the alley where Yi-sung had landed. Where Yi-sung had died alone, in the open air, where the blast had nowhere to go except up toward the empty sky. "He saved us," Monica said quietly. "He died for me," Bon Hwa corrected, and his voice carried 8 years of loyalty and 1 night of betrayal and the impossible weight of both. "They weaponized a man's love for his sister just to get a target. That is a broken, evil system. If you're tired of seeing good people crushed by corrupt games, smash that like button. Let's show them we don't support tyrants." The command van smelled like coffee gone cold, and the particular electricity of too many servers running in too small a space. Monica sat cross-legged on the floor, 3 laptops open in front of her, fingers moving across keyboards with the rhythm of someone who thought in code instead of words. Bon Hwa leaned against the wall behind her, silent except for the occasional shift of fabric as he checked his phone for updates on Yi-sung's sister, on the cleanup crew still working the meat packing district, on the daughter whose photograph had been in enemy hands. "Here," Monica said, turning one screen so he could see. "T-Min's been bleeding your accounts for 7 months. Small amounts, nothing that would trigger your auditors, but consistent. He's not just stealing money. He's building a parallel infrastructure. Shell companies in Singapore, cryptocurrency wallets in jurisdictions that don't cooperate with Korean law enforcement. Offshore accounts tied to an LLC, registered to a dead man in Panama." "I know my brother is ambitious," Bon Hwa said quietly, "but this is..." "Surgical," Monica finished. "This is someone who had professional help. Look at the routing protocols. These transactions are bouncing through servers that belong to a joint task force operation. The kind of operation that's supposed to be targeting organized crime, not collaborating with it." She pulled up another window, showing a series of encrypted communications she'd intercepted from T-Min's phone records. "Your brother made a deal. He gives them access to the Yo Syndicate's networks. They give him immunity and the resources to take over once you're dead. Clean slate, new regime, same criminal empire, but now with government protection." Bon Hwa was quiet for a long moment, and Monica could feel the weight of what she was telling him. Not just betrayal, strategic annihilation. "So we kill him," he said finally. "No," Monica closed the laptops, turned to face him fully. "We kill him and they just find another collaborator. They've already invested too much in this operation to walk away. We need to destroy the entire network, not just cut off one head. She took a breath, knowing what she was about to propose would sound insane. I need to die. Bonhoeffer's expression didn't change, but she saw his hand move fractionally toward the weapon at his hip, the instinct of a man who'd heard that phrase too many times in contexts that ended badly. T-Min thinks you're dead or running, Monica continued. He doesn't know about me, not really. I'm just the waitress who happened to be there. But if I survive you, if I get picked up by the cleanup crew and I play it right, I can flip. I can make them believe I switched sides, that I'm willing to sell what I know about your operations for the right price. She met his eyes. I can become T-Min's asset, and once I'm inside, I can burn everything he's built from the inside out. They'll kill you the second you're no longer useful. Only if they figure out I'm playing them. Monica smiled, and it was the first time Bonhwa had seen her smile. It was sharp enough to cut. They won't. I used to do this for a living. The 2 train at midnight carried the kind of passengers who didn't ask questions. Shift workers heading home, late-night cleaners, people who'd learned that survival in New York meant keeping your eyes on your phone and your business to yourself. Monica sat 3 seats from the door, Bonhwa across from her, both of them maintaining the careful distance of strangers who'd never grabbed each other's necks and whispered about snipers in the rain. She saw them board at 96th Street. 3 men in maintenance uniforms that were too clean, too new, carrying toolboxes that sat wrong in their hands. Bonhwa saw them too. She caught the micro-adjustment of his posture, the way his right hand moved fractionally closer to the weapon she knew was under his jacket. The doors closed. The train lurched forward into the tunnel, and the maintenance workers reached into their toolboxes. Bonhwa moved first, crossing the space between them in 2 steps and slamming his elbow into the nearest attacker's throat before the man could raise his gun. Monica was already rolling off her seat, hitting the floor as gunfire cracked through the subway car. Suppressed, professional, the kind of shooting that said these weren't street thugs hired for quick work. These were operators. Passengers screamed and dove for cover. One of the attackers swung his weapon toward Monica, but Bonhwa caught his wrist and broke it with a sound like snapping wood, then drove the man's head into the metal pole hard enough to dent both. The second attacker fired twice. Monica felt the bullets pass close enough to stir the air near her face, before Bonhwa closed the distance and put 3 rounds center mass. The third man was smarter. He'd positioned himself at the far end of the car, using the crowd as cover, his weapon trained not on Bonhwa but on Monica. "Drop it or the woman dies," he said in English, accent suggesting former military, probably private contractor. Bonhwa froze, weapon still raised, and Monica saw the calculation happening behind his eyes. He could make the shot, probably, but probably wasn't good enough when the margin was measured in milliseconds and her life. "Do it," Monica said quietly, and squeezed the blood pack hidden in her vest. The sound of Bonhwa's gun was massive in the enclosed space. The attacker went down, and Monica collapsed backward, red spreading across her white uniform shirt, her hand clutching her side, where the fake wound leaked synthetic blood that smelled wrong but looked perfect in the dim subway lighting. Bonhwa was beside her instantly, his hands on her face, and she could see genuine fear in his eyes even though he knew. He had to know this was the plan. "Go," she whispered, loud enough for anyone listening. "Go, they'll kill you, just go." The train was slowing, approaching 72nd Street. Bonhwa hesitated for 1 more second, his thumb brushing her cheek, and then he was gone, disappearing through the connecting door as the platform lights began to flash past the windows. Monica lay there, breathing shallow, keeping her eyes half-closed, waiting for the next phase, waiting to be found, waiting to die so she could be reborn as someone else. 2 weeks later, Monica stood in T-Min's penthouse office in Midtown, watching him sign documents that would transfer the last of his brother's legitimate holdings into shell companies he controlled. He'd gained weight since the assassination attempt, or maybe it was just confidence that made him look fuller, softer around the edges in a way Bonhwa never had been. Where Bonhwa carried power like a weapon kept sharpened and hidden, T-Min wore it like jewelry, Obvious, expensive, desperate to be noticed. "The Portland shipment clears customs on Thursday," she said, sliding another folder across his glass desk. "Your brother's people don't know you've already paid off the inspectors. They're expecting interference that won't come." T-Min smiled, and it was the smile of a man who'd spent his whole life being underestimated and was finally proving everyone wrong in the worst possible way. "My brother always said I didn't have the instincts for this business, that I was too soft, too American, too educated." He looked up at her. "What do you think, Miss Chen?" She'd given him the name Sarah Chen, complete with a backstory about freelance intelligence work and a reputation for selling to the highest bidder. He'd bought it completely because men like T-Min believed that everyone had a price, that loyalty was just a transaction that hadn't been properly negotiated yet. "I think your brother confused caution with weakness," Monica said, keeping her voice neutral, professional. "You saw the angles he missed. You understood that the real power wasn't in the streets, it was in the paperwork, the offshore accounts, the legal structures that make crime look like commerce." "Exactly." T-Min leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking under him. "BonHWA built an empire on fear and violence. I'm building one on infrastructure and legitimacy. In 5 years, the Yo name will be on hospital wings and university endowments, not FBI watch lists." He paused, studying her. "You made the right choice, switching sides. My brother would have gotten you killed eventually. He gets everyone killed eventually." Monica felt something cold settle in her chest, but she kept her expression smooth. "He wasn't paying me enough to die for him," she said, and watched T-Min's smile widen because that was exactly what he wanted to hear. That everyone was for sale. That his brother's fatal flaw was treating loyalty like it meant something beyond dollars and leverage. "Speaking of payment," T-Min said, pulling out his phone, "I'm transferring your bonus for the Portland intel, 200,000 as promised. Consider it a down payment on our partnership." He looked at her with something that might have been respect if it wasn't so transparently transactional. "You're going to make me very rich, Miss Chen." "That's the plan," Monica said, and meant it in ways he'd never understand until it was far too late. T-Min actually believes Monica switched sides just for money because he thinks everyone is for sale. If you can't stand arrogant people who think they can buy human beings, comment, "Respect is earned" below. The boardroom on the 47th floor of the Helmsley building had floor-to-ceiling windows that made the city look like a circuit board, all glowing lines and pulsing nodes, stretching toward horizons that didn't exist. T-Min stood at the head of the table in a suit that probably cost more than Monica had made in her entire year as a waitress. Surrounded by lawyers and accountants, and the kind of men who facilitated the transfer of empires with fountain pens and NDAs. "Gentlemen," T-Min said, his voice carrying the particular satisfaction of someone who'd spent his whole life being called the Spare and was now claiming the throne. "Today marks the beginning of a new era for the Yo organization, one built on legitimacy, transparency, and partnership with those who understand that the future of international commerce requires." Monica stopped listening. She'd heard this speech 3 times in rehearsal, had watched T-Min practice his pauses and emphases in front of a mirror like he was accepting an Oscar instead of consolidating a criminal empire. The ring on her right index finger was warm against her skin, the biometric scanner hidden in the band active and waiting. She'd built it herself in a hotel room in Queens, using components she'd ordered from 6 different suppliers across 3 continents, assembled with the same precision she'd once used to crack foreign intelligence networks. The signing took 17 minutes. Each page turned, each initial added, each witness signature collected with the solemnity of men who understood they were participants in something that would either make them legends or land them in federal custody. When it was done, T-Min stood and walked around the table, shaking hands with each person, accepting congratulations with the grace of someone who'd rehearsed humility without ever actually feeling it. Monica was last. She rose from her seat near the back, the assistant who'd made this all possible, the intelligence broker who'd sold out BonHWA for a paycheck. T-Min extended his hand, and she took it, letting the ring press against his palm for exactly 3 seconds while the scanner captured his fingerprints, his palm print, the unique thermal signature of his skin. "Congratulations, Mr. Yo," she said, and placed her other hand on his shoulder, letting the secondary scanner embedded in her bracelet capture his facial biometrics, the precise geometry of his features that would unlock every account he owned. "None of this would have been possible without you, Miss Chen," T-Min said, and he actually meant it, which made what came next even more satisfying. Monica walked to the windows while the lawyers packed their briefcases, pulled out her phone, and entered the access codes she'd just harvested. The transfers took 40 seconds. Every account T-Min owned, every shell company, every cryptocurrency wallet, every offshore holding, all of it routed through a series of cascading transactions that ended in accounts controlled by Bon HWA. Behind her, someone's phone buzzed, then another, then T-Min's. Monica watched his reflection in the window as he looked at his screen, watched the exact moment he realized his empire had just evaporated. "What?" he started, but Monica was already turning, already smiling. "The cost of doing business with people you can't trust," she said. "Mr. Yo." The door to the boardroom opened before T-Min could finish screaming into his phone, before his lawyers could do anything except freeze like animals who just realized they were in the wrong habitat. Yo Bon HWA walked in with blood on his collar and death in his eyes, flanked by two men carrying the kind of guns that made the accountants start calculating their own mortality instead of profit margins. "Hello, brother," Bon HWA said quietly, and the room went silent in the way rooms do when everyone simultaneously realizes they're trapped 47 floors above the street with nowhere to run. T-Min's face cycled through expressions, shock, rage, fear, then a desperate attempt at indignation. "You're supposed to be dead. The subway, the assassins, I saw the reports." "You saw what we wanted you to see," Monica said, moving to stand beside Bon HWA. "The blood was fake. The wound was theater. And you bought it because you're so convinced everyone is as disloyal as you that you couldn't imagine someone staying loyal even when it looked like suicide." One of the lawyers tried to move toward the door. Bon HWA's lieutenant shifted his weapon just enough to change the man's mind. "Nobody leaves," Bon HWA said. "Not until we're finished." Monica pulled out a tablet, turned it so the room could see. "For the past 2 weeks, I've had access to everything. T-Min's communications with his task force handlers, the bribes paid to federal agents, the locations of every safe house, every offshore account, every piece of evidence that proves a joint criminal conspiracy between a rogue government operation and organized crime." She smiled. "It's all backed up on servers in 7 different countries, all programmed to release automatically if anything happens to either of us. So here's how this works." She walked to where T-Min stood, his expensive suit suddenly looking like a costume he'd borrowed without permission. "You get nothing. No money, no power, no protection from the people you betrayed. Your government friends get exposed if they come after us, which means they'll cut you loose to save themselves. You're radioactive now, untouchable in all the wrong ways." "You can't," T-Min started, but Bon HWA cut him off. "I can, and I am." He looked at his brother with something that might have been pity if it wasn't buried under so much contempt. "You wanted the empire. You just didn't understand that empires built on betrayal collapse the moment someone smarter plays the game better than you." The lawyers were already moving toward the door, abandoning T-Min with the speed of rats leaving a sinking ship. Monica watched them go, then turned to Bon HWA. His tie was crooked, blood-stained at the collar where someone had gotten too close during whatever fight had left him looking like he'd walked through a war. She reached up, straightened the silk with fingers that had grabbed it 2 weeks ago to save his life, and leaned close enough that only he could hear. "The coast is clear," she whispered. His hand found hers, and they walked out together. The street outside the Helmsley building was empty in the way New York streets never are, which meant Bon HWA's people had cleared it, which meant they had maybe 90 seconds before NYPD noticed and responded. Monica walked half a step ahead, her hand in her jacket, where the weapon she'd taken from Bon HWA's lieutenant rested against her ribs. The autumn air was cold enough to see her breath, sharp enough to make her eyes water, Or maybe that was just exhaustion finally catching up to the adrenaline. She saw the laser sight before she saw the shooter. A red dot tracking across the concrete, searching, calibrating. Monica's body moved before her brain finished the calculation. She pulled the weapon, aimed at the roofline across the street where the glint of glass caught the streetlight, and fired 3 times. The laser disappeared. Something heavy hit the fire escape 2 stories up, then tumbled to the alley below with the finality of problems that solved themselves. Was that, Bon HWA started. The last one, Monica finished. T-Min's insurance policy, the sniper who missed you the first time. She lowered the weapon, felt her hands shaking now that it was over. He won't miss anyone again. They kept walking, past the corner where a black SUV waited with doors already open, past the intersection where sirens were starting to build in the distance, past the life they'd both been living for too long, the one built on violence and paranoia, and the kind of survival that cost more than it paid. Where do we go? Bon HWA asked. Monica looked at him, at the blood on his collar and the exhaustion in his eyes and the question that meant more than geography. Somewhere they'll never look, she said. Somewhere we can be boring. 3 years later, Monica stood in a kitchen in Gangnam that smelled like sesame oil and the particular chaos of a toddler who just discovered she could reach the refrigerator handle. Bon HWA sat at the table with their daughter on his lap, reading her a story about a rabbit who was too clever for the tiger, his voice soft in a way that would have terrified the men who used to work for him. "Mama," their daughter said, looking up with eyes that were Monica's but a smile that was definitely her father's. "Appa says you saved him from a bad man." Monica met Bon HWA's gaze across the kitchen, remembering rain and neon, and the moment she'd grabbed his tie and whispered 3 words that changed both their lives. "Actually," she said, walking over to kiss the top of their daughter's head, "we saved each other." Outside the window, Seoul moved through its evening rhythm. Traffic and voices and the anonymous piece of a city that didn't know their names, didn't care about their past, offered them the gift of being exactly what they'd never been before. Ordinary, safe, free. Bon HWA's hand found hers across the table, his thumb tracing the same pattern he'd traced that night in the brownstone, in the subway, in the boardroom when everything hung on a knife's edge. "No regrets?" he asked quietly. Monica looked at their daughter, at the life they'd built from the ashes of the empire they'd burned, and smiled. Not a single one. They finally got their piece, and the villains got exactly what they deserved. Nothing. If you love seeing justice served cold, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Hit the bell so you never miss a story where the good guys win.